was to ask why, with a water crisis looming globally, at least that's the discourse, why is it that water for nature is important? And what is it that we should do about it? And why is it really relevant to people's issues? You'll hear, of course, a lot of statistics around water and what would be the dimensions of the global water crisis. There's a lot of talk about crisis in the world these days, and increasingly water is considered perhaps to be one of those crises, or a crisis at least that's on the horizon. And the statistics can be alarming, if quite often a little bit unseen. So there's 1 billion people around the world who lack safe drinking water. There's more than 1 billion people who live in areas where it's reckoned that water use is unsustainable. 70% of water use is for agriculture. That means a lot of the water that's being used is unseen. We don't really realize how much is being used. Water consumption in somewhere like the USA, where we are, is about 6 times higher per person than it is in China. Demand is rising globally as population grows, but also as wealth grows. One of the results is that lakes are shrinking, rivers are not reaching the sea in places, which is extraordinary if you stop and think about it, and aquifers are being mined. And all in all, by some estimates, by 2025, there'll be 3.5 billion people living in water-stressed regions around the world. And water, in that context, threatens security. It threatens security around water itself. Food security, if 70% of water is being used for agriculture, if we start not having enough water in places around the world, then that's going to threaten food security. Energy security also, another high-profile issue in the world today. Economic security, and if we consider the transboundary issues around water and river basin management, national security too in many places. There was published a year or two ago a comprehensive assessment of water and agriculture, and one of its conclusions was that managing water sustainably, or moving to solutions to the water crisis, would not require a technical revolution. What was required was a management and policy revolution. And that's really the context of some of the activities that IUCN is involved in globally. So in the midst of all of that crisis talk and the threats that that poses to the way people live and work and earn their livelihoods, why is it that we should bother with water for nature? The graph in the bottom left, bottom right, bottom left, right. I'm terrible at left and right. Especially when it's backwards. Anyways, the graph at the bottom of the screen is from the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment. And it shows, you see at the bottom line there is freshwater, that freshwater ecosystems are the most degraded and most under threat around the world. Something like 50% of wetlands have been lost globally. So, one of the reasons that we need to worry about water for nature is just for the value of biodiversity itself. So, what though makes water for nature important for people? What's people's interest in that problem? So wetland ecosystems and the functioning of healthy watersheds are tied to a large number of benefits for people. Income and nutrition and health and livelihoods, water supply, disaster risk reduction, jobs, economic growth are all tied to water. It's hard to get away from water in the world, even if you're in a dry place because you need it. And the reason that there's all those links is because of ecosystem services. Ecosystem services are the benefits that people obtain from nature. It's an important concept in ecology and increasingly an important concept in policy dialogues about water. So the benefits that people obtain from nature relating to all sorts of things, including security, including the basic necessities of life, health, social relations, social interactions, the health of the economy itself. But these benefits that we get from nature, from water for nature, mean that destroying ecosystems has an economic cost. And this graph shows that where we're not very careful and we're not smart, that these costs can easily outstrip the benefits of destroying nature, of clearing wetlands, of clearing forests. The graph at the furthest left relates to the value. The high bar is the value of an intact wetland versus the lower bar is the value of that area of land when it was cleared and used for intensive agriculture. So if we're not careful, we give up more than we gain. So the clear message is that ensuring water for nature is good for people. In fact, it's vital for people, and it's vital for our economy and the things that interest us. So with all that threat, but all those needs, what is it that we should do? Where do we find solutions? The first place to think about is the nature of the system we're dealing with, the nature of the system of water around the world. And one of the things that we need to be very careful of, in contrast to a lot of other natural resources, is water as a networked resource. It's almost like nature's original World Wide Web. Because everybody, all people and all species, and all branches of the economy, in one way or another, at one scale or another, log on every day to the water web worldwide. You can't get away from it. But it means also that the impacts that we have by fiddling with the system are themselves networked. So where you cause a problem with wetlands, that causes a problem for people. Where people make certain choices, that causes a problem for nature, and those impacts get propagated to some extent through the network, depending on the nature of the network. So water, in contrast to some natural resources, is a networked resource. And that has implications about how we therefore need to manage it and where we need to look for solutions. So water for nature, to solve problems around water for nature, we have to solve people's water problems. The network nature of water means solving nature's problems with water means solving people's problems. And so we have integrated ways of doing that. IWRM is Integrated Water Resources Management, policy language. And there's specific approaches to doing that, for example, environmental flows. How do you allocate water to the environment while also allocating it to different sectors of the economy in sustainable ways? IUCN's been working over the last 6-7 years, longer now I guess, on trying to do just that, on trying to have develop and test and implement ways of managing water in that way on the ground in various places in the world. So you see attached to these little teardrops different aspects of the work that go into managing water in an integrated way. It relates to water policy, empowering stakeholders, water governance, transboundary water agreements, the governance side of water. It relates to generating income for poor people, new assets for sustainable livelihoods, reducing climate risks, learning, and mobilizing finance. All of those things have to go into the mix to make things work. So to explain that a bit further, I want to quickly run through an example from our Water and Nature Initiative, which is from northern Nigeria, a river called the Komadugi-Yobe, which drains into Lake Chad. People are familiar with the problems with Lake Chad. It's running out of water and shrinking very rapidly. And the problems on the Komadugi-Yobe are part of that problem. There's been drought and climate change in the region in the 70s and 80s that's cut flows. Population is growing very rapidly in such a resource-poor environment. Flow has declined in the region, in the basin, by 35% since the 1960s. In a very poor place where people are very dependent on natural resources. There have been failed dam and irrigation projects that have cut incomes instead of produced benefits for poor people. There has been, as a result, devastation of agriculture and fisheries and livestock herding livelihoods in the basin. There is, because of the changing hydrology, because of the changing ecological dynamics of the basin, there's been problems with siltation and infestation, which has compounded those problems in the basin and in the wetlands around the basin, leading to conflict, leading to, in the context of somewhere like Nigeria, a real paralysis of institutions, with the result that poverty has got deeper. Vulnerability of population has increased, not decreased. So, in the context of trying to look for integrated solutions, our program set about doing the following actions. One is generating information that could be shared about the state of the basin, the state of hydrology in the basin. Working on building consensus around how to manage the catchment and how to restore the catchment. Working on delivering some results around pilot restorations you see in the picture at the top there, which have resulted in better flows in the river, return of some fish habitat, return of fisheries livelihoods in some places, resolution of conflicts in one district in the basin, conflicts reaching court, declined from about 110 per year to 5 per year as a result of the interventions in this program. Working on water governance, understanding the roles and responsibilities, transparency amongst different stakeholders, mobilizing finance. As a result of the innovations in this program, the various governments, federal and state in Nigeria, set up a trust fund of $125 million. They don't have all the money yet, but to implement the catchment management plan. And success there has led to an effort in Nigeria to scale up and to apply this kind of approach in other basins in Nigeria, and we hope increasingly other basins in the Lake Chad Basin. And that's through establishment of the Nigeria IWRM Commission that we work now increasingly closely with. The way forward in the Commodore Yobe, remember the starting point here was one of deep crisis and deep poverty, and please don't mistake me, we haven't solved the poverty problem in this region, but it's taken some important steps. But one of the ingredients into that was the very severity of the situation they faced, and the urgency of action is an important ingredient to getting on and doing things. But breaking, or at least moving toward breaking this cycle of degradation and poverty required a few elements to come together. Sharing of knowledge, governance reform, real results on the ground, political engagement at multiple levels in Nigeria, mobilizing finance and working across local to national scales. So from that, from the Commodore Yobe and from other basins where we work, solving water problems, remember this is about how do we solve water problems in the context of a looming water crisis. Solving water problems takes ecosystem services, recognizing, counting, keeping, and using those benefits from nature that we get from nature, not accidentally losing them, as can sometimes be the case. Ensuring that our infrastructure around water is sustainable, and understanding the economics of different choices for infrastructure, including choices between natural infrastructure, which is things like river basins, things like lakes and wetlands that provide us with services, and engineered options, and understanding the different choices and different combinations of infrastructure that might be best. Information and knowledge is key, in part because it empowers people to do better. Good governance is absolutely critical at multiple levels and coordinating across levels, enabling a focus on local priorities. So at higher levels, the focus is enablement. At local level, the focus is priorities. Now, what I haven't mentioned so far, of course, could be the elephant in the room with respect to water and the future water, the evolution of the water crisis over this century, and that's climate change. Water is really at the center of climate change impacts. When we talk about climate change impacts, we talk about drought, we talk about sea level rise, melting glaciers, storms, and floods, all of which are about water, which is sometimes forgotten, surprisingly. So adaptation to climate change starts with water. And some of the lessons, as we've digested them from the basins where we've been working, we see increasingly that we can apply in the climate change adaptation arena. And an important principle is this idea of resilience, ensuring that systems can recover from changes that are imposed on them. So the question with respect to adaptation then is, how do you put resilience into practice? And we've identified 4 pillars to that. The first is diversity. Diversity of economy, diversity of livelihoods for poor people, diversity of nature, and therefore the ecosystem services that are available to people. The second is sustainable infrastructure, combining engineered infrastructure options with natural infrastructure, ensuring that investment flows most optimally between them. The third one is critical for resilience. It's critical for managing water in the systems context that I mentioned, which is self-organization. This cannot be done successfully from decisions made in an office in the capital. It's clear around the world that that is not an optimal way forward. especially in a changing climate where uncertainties grow. The ability to organize for yourself will be critical and more critical as we go forward into the future. And what that means practically is good governance. Good governance, participatory governance, that empowers people to work in adaptive institutions. That's the lesson we have clearly from our experience in northern Nigeria. And learning. Learning at individual level, learning at institutional levels is key. So water solutions, as they've emerged for us, help us to build climate resilience. So just to wrap up then, 3 quick conclusions for you. First, water for nature is benefits for people. We mustn't lose sight of that in terms of security, in terms of fighting poverty, underpinning growth, and climate adaptation. Second is ecosystem-based, ecosystem-centered integrated water resource management delivers water solutions. In practice, we've seen that in our basins around the world. There's good ways of doing it and there's bad ways of doing it, but if we focus on the good ways, we can have solutions. Water solutions build climate resilience, critical. And the priorities we have coming up now are scaling up. How do we get good practice implemented more widely? Second, ensuring that policy in water, climate, and the related sectors enables solutions to be developed and focuses investment properly. And the third is taking action on resilience, turning it from a framework, as I've outlined it, into demonstration and learning and policy on the ground. So, I will finish there. For more information, you see the brochure that I handed out. You see on the left there a set of toolkits, which talk in some detail about how to implement the kinds of approaches that we've been working on. I have single copies of those available for really keen people. Otherwise, they're available for download at that website, or from me. You can just request I'll send you physical